b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי וינפש שבת ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא בריאה גפן amen. Chaim. Okay, Torah study blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Amen. Okay, good Shabbos, everyone. We have a double portion, Bahar b'chukotai, and when we're done, we'll say Chazak, v'nitchazek, because we are completing today the book of Leviticus. Okay, so we have a lot to get to today. There's a lot to explain here. It's a bit convoluted. It's from the genius of Rabbi Ari Kahn, who's one of my favorite rabbis, who sort of put this idea together that I want to share with you, and I hope that you will understand. And I think, so first of all, there's a lot to get to, which means that if you have a comment, and you don't feel that we really need it, maybe we don't. But I also think that by the time we complete this, you'll say, I can't believe I got to this point in life, and I didn't understand. I didn't know this. So first of all, we're on the 38th day of the Omer. Well, tonight will be 38th day of the Omer, which means that we're only 12 days until Shavuot. Right? So we're making our way towards Shavuot. And Shavuot, we started counting down to with the counting of the Omer from the second Seder. We start the second night of Pesach, and from there you count 50 days, and then that 50th day is Har Sinai, where we got the Torah. Now, the Torah tells us that we count the 50 days, but it doesn't tell us that when you get to Shavuot, that's when you get the Torah. All we have is that when you get to 50 days, you have a harvest festival. It doesn't specifically say in the Torah that that's when the Torah came. In fact, we're in Leviticus. We already got the Torah. We're going to learn now about the counting of the Omer, but we already got the Torah in Exodus, remember? Mount Sinai and all that? Okay. Now, so, and over there in Exodus, we never had this whole counting down thing. Now, you could put it together, and the rabbis do, by saying, look, you can see when they left Egypt, and then you can see when they get to Mount Sinai, and then they got the Torah. But it doesn't talk about counting down the days of the Omer towards getting till Mount Sinai. And now we have talking about counting down the days and what all of that means, but we have it counting down with regard to something else. So we know that there's what's going on here, which we'll look at, a macro and a micro. The micro is that we count down 49 days, and then on the 50th day we get the Torah. But the macro is we count down 49 years, and on the 50th year there's something called the Jubilee year, which is the Yovel. And so there's a connection between counting down 1 to 49 with regard to days and then getting the Torah, to the idea of counting down 49 years, and in the 50th year is what's called the Jubilee year. Now, what happens in the Jubilee year? All slaves go free. All right, and this is where we have every year. I tell you, this is the verse that's on the Liberty Bell, and then one of you texts me, usually John, you don't even know the history of the Liberty Bell. Why even mentioning it? And it's true, I usually don't. But I do know that this is the verse that's on the Liberty Bell. And I always forget the history of the Liberty Bell, even though I'm from near Philadelphia. Okay, which is a sad place to be today after the Sixers, the Flyers, and the Phillies all got slaughtered all week. Okay, I keep telling myself year after year, sports don't matter. Sports don't matter, but these teams are terrible. Okay. Okay, there's one more thing to it. So what I want to do now is start in two different places, which means we want to start with Leviticus 25:1, and that's where we'll start reading from. But if you have a page marker of some sort, a bookmark, a pen, a napkin, something, if you wouldn't mind to now place a marker at Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Exodus 28. So that this way, you'll be able to flip and look at both sections at the same time. And if anyone has the page number of either, you could shout them out. We're looking for 25:1 in Leviticus,
946.
which is page 946 in Plout, and 547 in Exodus 8:20, verse 8. Now, does everyone see the logic? If you have it marked, you can look back and forth relatively quickly. That's 28, page 547. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with Leviticus 25:1. Everyone have that? Okay, Norman, here we go. Into the mic, Leviticus 25:1. Let's get going. Okay.
The Eternal One spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign to you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of the Eternal. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of the Eternal. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. But you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce. You, your male friend and female, male and female slaves.
Okay, so, one more verse.
The hired and bound laborers who live with you, and your cattle and the beasts in your land, they eat all its yield.
Okay, so what we just said, Leviticus chapter 25, begin verse 1, which is this week's Torah portion, Bahar. We begin sort of with a return to Mount Sinai. Right? Verse 1 says, and God spoke to Moses, Bahar. What's Bahar? It's a mountain. But it says here specifically Sinai. Now, most of the time when you're in Exodus, we don't usually hear Sinai. We hear the mountain of God, or Mount Horeb, Chorev in Hebrew. We don't hear Sinai that often, but here we hear, or in Hebrew, Sinai. But I want to point out, as we're talking about 6 years that the land shall rest, in the 7th year the land goes fallow, which means that in the 7th year the land is resting. The word that's used, if you look at the end of verse 2, where it says here, well, verse 2 says, speak to the children of Israel, say to them, when you come into the land I give you, the land shall observe Shabbat. Right? So it's the same word, right? The land has a Shabbos just like we do, just like people do. So the question is, well, what does that mean? We know what Shabbos is. Shabbos is, shul, Torah study, kiddush, challah, meals, nap, bar mitzvah. But what does it mean for the land? Richard? Is it play on words? A little bit. Reju. Okay. Okay. So, but going fallow pretty much means rest. You can't work the land. You can't work the land, which is Shabbat. We can't work either. It's a cessation of work. That's what Shabbat means. The word Shabbat literally means rest. But if you look now in verse 4, there's a little more to it. And before we look at, let's just look at it. But on the seventh year, a complete rest shall be for the land. Now, there's a difference between rest, I guess, and complete rest. Now, what's the difference between rest and complete rest? In Hebrew, when we say rest, we call that Shabbat. But when we say in Hebrew complete rest, we don't say Shabbat, we say Shabbat Shabbaton. You ever heard that expression? So that's a complete rest. And that's what you have here in verse 4. Uvashana hashvi'it, and in the seventh year, Shabbat Shabbaton. It's not just a Shabbat, it's a Shabbat Shabbaton. A complete rest. Now, we have Shabbat, but then we also have the Sabbath of Sabbaths. Shabbat Shabbaton. What do we call Shabbat Shabbaton in the Torah? Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is referred to as Shabbat Shabbaton. So the seventh year going fallow isn't just a Shabbat, it's a Shabbat Shabbaton. So you see what the Torah just did there? The Torah just said to you, the seventh year isn't so much like Shabbat, it's more like Yom Kippur. Okay. Clear so far? Now, we didn't say so much what the difference is between Shabbat and Yom Kippur, but it's pretty clear. On Yom Kippur, you also have a day of rest, right? Meaning you're not allowed to do all the types of work that you do on Shabbat on Yom Kippur either. You're not supposed to drive, use electricity, all the different categories of work. You're not supposed to do those on Yom Kippur either. But on Yom Kippur, there are three other things that you're not supposed to do that you are allowed to do on Shabbat. Eat, obviously, have sexual relations, and anoint yourself. We don't do the anointing so much anymore, but they used to, pour oil on their feet when they went from one tent to another. But the Torah has this extra line that says on Shabbat, Shabbaton, you have to afflict yourselves. And the reason that we do those things is because on Yom Kippur, we want to be like the angels. And the angels don't eat, drink, anoint, sexual relations, those kinds of things. And so we kick it up a notch. And that kicking it up a notch is taking us from Shabbat to Shabbat Shabbaton, a complete rest. You see that? Okay. So now that we know how to define a little bit better what the land going fallow every 7 years means, if you flip back with me to Exodus 20, where we said 28, Judy, would you mind reading there, verse 8?
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlements.
Now, if you would transpose those lines over what we just read in Leviticus, you see it's the same thing.
For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea, and all that is in them. And he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Right, so if we would look, okay, so I want to read one verse in Exodus and then go right back and read that verse in Leviticus. So maybe, Judy, if you read the verse in Exodus, then I'll read the one in Leviticus. So if you would just mind reading there. Just read verse 10. Exodus, verse 10. But while she's, okay, so this is going to be a little tricky. But while she's reading verse 10, can everyone skip back to where we were in Leviticus to verse 6? So everyone but Judy, go to Leviticus. Everyone but Judy, go to verse 6 in Leviticus.
But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlements.
Okay, now, so given what she just said, your cattle, your slaves, everybody who works for you, none of them are allowed to rest. But now we look at Leviticus. Leviticus verse 6 says, the resting of the land shall be yours to eat for you and your slave, and for your maidservant, and for your hired worker, and for the one who resides for you, and for your animals, and for your beasts, and all of them. It's the same thing. That there's this sense that everybody has to be able to observe the day. Those who work for you, even your animals, even your land, everybody has to feel as if they are able to rest on that day, or at least to feel free on that day. Okay, does that make sense so far? Okay, now knowing all of that, back to 25, where Norman left off at 7. Okay, so 8. We're back to our original section, Leviticus 25, verse 8. Okay, this is just where Norman left off. You with me so far? Okay, 25:8, here we go.
You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Okay,
can you do that kind of math in your head? 7 and 7? Okay, so I'm not so good with numbers, but even I can figure that out. Okay, now, we said that every 7th year the land goes fallow, but every 7 cycles of that, 49 years. So, by the way, that every 7th year that the land goes fallow, that's called Shemitah, right? Shemitah. But every 7 cycles of that brings you to 49, right? 7 cycles of 7 is 49. Meaning the next year, once you've complete 7 cycles, is 50. And that 50 is called Yovel, which means like the Jubilee year. So all I'm saying so far is that every 49 years, then the 50th year is special. But you can't help but notice that it took us 49 days to get from Egypt to Mount Sinai, and then on the 50th day, we got the Torah. Do you see that? Okay. Which in Exodus, we never learned that. And here we don't learn that. We don't learn that on the 50th day we got the Torah, but we did. So my question to you is, how do we know that? Okay, so we're getting there. Now we're up to verse 9.
If you're not so good with numbers, I'll continue with Leviticus.
I knew that was coming. Actually, had a feeling you were going to say that. Okay.
Then you shall sound the horn loud. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the day of atonement, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to his holding, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you, and jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth of, or harvest the untrimmed vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his holding. When you sell property to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. In buying from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee, and in selling to you, he shall charge you only for the remaining crop years.
Okay, so what's going to happen now is once you get into the Jubilee year, and you've counted these 50 years. By the way, one thing that is kind of interesting, we don't do this on Shavuot. But if you just skip back to verse 9 for a second. So when you get to the 50th year, there's one mitzvah that you have in the Torah that you need to do. Did you catch that in verse 9? Blow the shofar. Why? So then we say, oh, wait a minute. Why do we blow the shofar? What does this have to do with the shofar? And I don't know yet. I mean, I know, but you shouldn't know yet, because we didn't, unless you looked ahead in the sources. But you blow the shofar. What else? So if I'm asking you the question, when we get to the 50th year, what are the things that characterize that moment? One of them is they used to blow the shofar. Now, it just so happens that it's mentioned in the Torah, but it's not necessarily clear, although it's made clear in the Talmud. What day did they blow the shofar? What day of the year, when you got to the 50th year, what day did they blow the shofar to say, from this day on, we're starting the Yovel? Yom Kippur. Good. So on Yom Kippur, we have the blowing of the shofar, the beginning of Yovel. I'm saying when it's the 50th year. The other 49 years, forget. But when it's the 50th year, on Yom Kippur, you blow the shofar for the purpose of Yovel. All slaves go free. Right? And that's when we proclaim dror throughout the land, right? That's when we say proclaim liberty throughout the land, which is on the Liberty Bell. Okay? And all slaves go free, which happens to be Yom Kippur. Okay. Now, why is that interesting? We haven't said yet. But now, what this sounds a little bit more like now, because I just said that, is Yom Kippur than Shavuot. Right? There's something unique about this day. It happens on Yom Kippur, and all slaves go free. Right? Now, why do I say that? So this is the last time I'd like to do this, but if you would mind skipping back to where we were in Exodus. If you don't look at them side by side, it sort of doesn't make sense. So, but this time we're going to go back to Exodus 19, verse 1. Exodus 19, verse 1. Okay, 5:22? Okay. Who? Okay, Kenya, would you mind reading verse 1? On the third month?
So we're on page 539, right? No, 5.
Exodus 19:1.
On the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai.
Okay, so what I want to point out to you, one thing that's similar to this section, to what we just read in Leviticus, is that the word Sinai is used. Not Chorev, not the mountain of God. And when the Torah does this, it's because it wants you to connect two sections. So what it does is it'll use a terminology in certain sections that it'll only use there so that the reader will see, and then you're supposed to look at both sections. That's basic Torah hermeneutical principles. Okay, now, we're going to do something crazy. We're going to skip to verse 11. Oh. Don't go nuts. Verse 11, okay? Wow. Which is 10 verses after the one we just read. Okay? Okay. No. Okay, Genya, do you see verse 11?
Verse 11. Okay.
Please.
Let them be ready for the third day, for on the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people on Mount Sinai.
Right, so there you have again Mount Sinai mentioned. Okay, let's keep going.
You shall set bounds for the people around you, around about, saying, beware of going up the mountains or touching the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be either stoned or shot, beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they may go up to the mountains. Moses came down from the mountains to the people and warned the people to stay pure, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. On the third day, as morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and the dense cloud upon the mountains and a very loud blast of the horn.
You see that? So at Mount Sinai, when we got the Torah, there was shofar blasting. I just want to point that out. There was shofar blasting.
Also a ringing of a
But
shofar.
if you come back, Genya, would you mind reading verse 13 one more time?
Sure. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be either stoned or shot, beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram horn sounds a long blast, they may go up on the mountain.
Okay. And the word there that's used for the long blast is yovel. If you look in the Hebrew, if you can look in the Hebrew, 4 words from the end of the Hebrew. Do you see that? Anyone see that? The 4th word from the end of the verse 13 is yovel. Did everyone catch that? Okay, so if I'm comparing this section that we just read in Exodus to our section in Bahar in Leviticus, some of the similarities I have is the word Sinai is used, a shofar is blasted, and I have the word yovel. And so the rabbis connect these 2 sections and say, whoa, what's the connection here between the yovel year, every 50th year, and getting the Torah on Mount Sinai? Okay. Now, there's one other connection that shofar is one of them. Right? We have shofar, we have the use of Mount Sinai, and we have the word yovel. But we have one other thing that connects this 50th year to this to the giving of the Torah. But we'll get into that in a second.
This may be a very basic question, but Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, symbolizes a very sober and very contrived day to say I'm sorry for my sins, to make repairs. And a year of Jubilee by definition, that word, is joy, it's rejoicing, it's celebration. So I find that I'm having a hard time connecting one concept to the other through the same observances.
I love that.
Say something about that.
That's a perfect segue. That's exactly where I want to go. There is no day. I mean, it's like I paid you. I mean, that was unbelievable. What are, according to the rabbis, without looking at the source sheet, what's the most joyous day on the calendar? If you had to pick from all the days of the year. Simchas Torah? So you said, your point was, which is an awesome point, I'm so glad you said it, Jubilee sounds fun. Look, when I hear Jubilee, I think of cherries Jubilee. That's the only usage I ever have of, when else? I don't ever say Jubilee unless it involves cherries. And it's usually like on a cruise. That's one of the, they'll like flambe it or something. That's what I think of. But, I mean, they have, baked Alaska night, and they have chairs. Okay. And with the, all right. So, look at what the Mishnah says. You're going to love this. Ed, would you mind reading? Or Joe, or whoever has the mic? Look at the first source on the sheet. Whoever.
You have to take our marker out.
Yeah, you don't need the marker anymore.
Okay.
Look at the first source on the sheet. You're going to love this, Genya. You're going to love this.
All right. Mishnah Tani 4:8. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, "There were no days as joyous for the Jewish people as the 15th of Av and as Yom Kippur."
Yom Kippur. No days are more. Now, 15th of Av is called Tu B'Av. And that was the matchmaker day. We're going to see what that is in a second, and we'll see why. But what the rabbis say here is actually, why are you comparing Yom Kippur? I mean, you ask a very good question. Why are you comparing Yom Kippur to the Yovel, which is supposed to be this happy time where everyone goes free and everyone loves each other and we're all taking care of each other and you're even taking care of your animals and you're even taking care of your land and everything's wonderful? To Yom Kippur, it's like the most serious, sober day of the year. Why? Okay, so comes this Mishnah to bring the answer. Here we go.
As on them the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in white clothes, which each woman borrowed from another. Why were they borrowed? They did this so as not to embarrass one who did not have her own white garments. All the garments that the women borrowed require immersion, as those who previously wore them might have been ritually impure. And the daughters of Jerusalem would go out and dance in the vineyards. And what would they say? "Young man, please lift up your eyes and see what you choose for yourself for a wife. Do not set your eyes toward beauty, but set your eyes toward a good family," as the verse states. "Grace is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised." And it further says, "Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates." And similarly, it says in another verse, "Go forth, daughters of Zion, and gaze upon King Solomon, upon the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding and on the day of the gladness of his heart." This verse is explained as an allusion to special days. On the day of his wedding, this is the giving of the Torah through the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur. The name King Solomon in this context, which also means King of Peace, is interpreted as a reference to God. And on the day of the gladness of his heart, this is the building of the temple. May it be rebuilt speedily in our days.
Okay, so there's a lot of, you need to know a lot just to be able to understand any of that. But let's break it down just a little bit. So, Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av are happy days. Now, Tu B'Av is the 15th day of Av, which is a super joyous day, but comes a week after a really horrible day. Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. But so a week later, when you finally recovered from Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the holy temples, you celebrate the idea of couples getting together and getting married and meeting each other and getting married. And that's when Tu B'Av was. Why? Because it says in the book of Proverbs, if you look here at the end, that should be a day of gladness in your heart. Right? The idea that couples meet, that you should have this gladness in your heart. Well, in Proverbs, it also says you should have this gladness in your heart on the day the temple is rebuilt. Well, you just had you just had Tisha B'Av, and everyone's crying because the temples are destroyed. But something great is going to happen. Something great that happens is compared to the idea of the temple being rebuilt. So they used to have this tradition of a week later, they would have like a discotheque night, and like a ball of some sort. And, they would set up, all the single women would go out and the men would, come and try to find their matches, because the idea of finding your match is compared to the joy of the temple being rebuilt. And so they're trying to look forward and saying, even though the temple is destroyed, Judaism's going to go on. And how do we know it's going to go on? Because making matches is a sign that someday the temple is going to be rebuilt again. So that was a very joyous day, because it reminded people, even after the morning of Tisha B'Av, that there's still a future for the Jewish people, and that there's still a future for the Jewish people in Jerusalem with the rebuilt temple. So that's Tu B'Av. But so then you ask the question, well, what does that have to do with Yom Kippur? So in Yom Kippur, okay, I didn't want to give this away too early, but all right. All right. So what happens on Yom Kippur? I told you this was convoluted. What happens on Yom Kippur? Well, this is not your question.
Forgiveness.
You forgive each other, right? And what does forgiveness amongst friends do? Okay, so the goal of Yom Kippur is spelled out in Jewish law. You know what the ultimate code of Jewish law is called? The Shulchan Aruch. So in the 1500s, Joseph Caro wrote his summary of the Talmud that to this day it's what everyone follows as Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch. So if you look at the third, skip the second source for a second, but look at the third source, and we'll find out what's the point of Yom Kippur. Okay.
A man should appease his friend, person whom he wronged on the eve of Yom Kippur, containing 4 paragraphs.
All right, so now I'm going to reveal one of my cards. You ready? I haven't revealed much, and that's because I still have 19 minutes. But the Torah is drawing a comparison to tell you that Shavuot and Yom Kippur are really the same thing. They're really the same thing. Okay? Now, we haven't said why yet, but we've made a few arguments. One is they both are a Shabbat Shabbaton. The Torah calls them both. So listen to what I'm arguing. That Shavuot and Yom Kippur are essentially the same thing. Clear so far? Now, what are my arguments for saying that? They're both referred to as Shabbat Shabbaton. They both involve a shofar. And they both involve Har Sinai. Okay? They both involve Mount Sinai. Shavuot is where we get the Torah, obviously. Now, Now, here's the question, though, that you can ask. And this is what you should have just said. What does Yom Kippur have to do with Mount Sinai?
Nothing.
Right, nothing. Okay, if you do know the answer, don't say it. Because this works best when you all say, what are you talking about? Yom Kippur has nothing to do with Mount Sinai. Did you get that? Okay. So let me review one more time. I know this is convoluted. The Torah is saying Shavuot and Yom Kippur are the same thing. Now, why do they need to be the same thing? We'll get to that later. But they're the same thing. Why are they the same thing? Well, we haven't said yet, but there's a lot in common. They're both Shabbat Shabbaton. They're both a complete rest. They're both involve the shofar. They both involve Mount Sinai. Now, the shofar is clear. I showed you in both places where it said blow the shofar. Mount Sinai is clear. I showed you both places where it said Mount Sinai and not Mount Horeb or not the mountain of God or not any of the other nicknames that the Torah has for Mount Sinai. The only thing that we haven't figured out is what does Mount Sinai have to do with Yom Kippur. We know what it has to do with Shavuot because Shavuot is the day that we get the Torah at Mount Sinai. So the only thing we haven't figured out yet is what does Yom Kippur have to do with Mount Sinai? We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Okay, now, so now that we've cleared all that up, let's just go to the Shulchan Aruch one more time. Start from the beginning. A man should appease.
A man should appease his friend, a person whom he wronged, on the eve of Yom Kippur, containing 4 paragraphs.
Okay, so it's not so much that you need to be forgiven. it's not so much for you that you got forgiven. It's the appeasement you gave the other person. That's the mitzvah. That's the command, according to Jewish law. And the goal of Yom Kippur is that all of the Jewish people are united as one. That there are no rifts or fights or battles between any of us. We're all one. Now, I don't think I brought the... Did I bring the Rashi? No, I didn't bring this Rashi. But there's a famous Rashi that says that what happened at Mount Sinai when we got the Torah, you know that famous section where we say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll accept it and we'll listen to it? Rashi says there, Ke'ish echad b'lev echad, as one person with one heart. At Mount Sinai, so I'm about to draw you a connection again between Yom Kippur and Shavuot. On Shavuot, when we got the Torah, the entire nation of Israel, we were all united as if we had one heart. Can you imagine a moment in time where there wasn't one Jew annoyed with another Jew?
No.
It hasn't happened since. Not one Jew was jealous of another Jew. Not one Jew hated another Jew. Not one Jew thought it was annoying the way another Jew chewed or snored or whatever. No Jews owed another Jew money. Nothing. It was perfect. We were all one heart at Mount Sinai. That's Shavuot. What's Yom Kippur? We all appease each other and get back to that. So do you see there that Yom Kippur is about trying to recreate what happened at Mount Sinai? Now, there's one more piece to this. What color do we wear on Yom Kippur? White. Why? Because, no. Oh, someone said it. Because we want to be like the angels. Which is the same reason why we don't eat, drink, or have relations or anoint ourselves. Because on Yom Kippur, we want to be like the angels, and the angels don't do those things. But the other thing about angels, and the reason we wear white, is because the angels always get along with each other. The angels are always at peace with each other. They never fight with each other. And so the real reason that we don't eat, drink, have sexual relations, anoint ourselves, and wear white on Yom Kippur is not to afflict ourselves. It's to try to be like the angels to get to the point where we're all united as one. We're all appeased with each other. It's not so much about forgiveness. It's about removing rifts between the Jewish people and uniting us as one heart and one person like we were at Mount Sinai. Clear so far? Okay, now I'll reveal to you. Let's read the whole Shulchan Aruch there, and then I'll reveal to you one more piece of this.
Yom Kippur does not atone for sins between a man and his comrade, fellow man, until he conciliates him. Even if he angered him and only in words, he is required to appease him, his fellow man, and if at first he's not pacified, he must return and go to him a second and third time. Each time he should take 3 men with him, and if on the 3rd time he does not become reconciled, he no longer is obligated to him. Nevertheless, afterwards, he should say before 10 people that he did request forgiveness from him. The person who was wronged was his teacher. He must go to him many times until he becomes appeased.
Right. So the goal is not forgiveness. The goal is appeasement. If the goal was forgiveness, you could just go one time and say to God, look, I asked for forgiveness. And God says, no. Yes, you asked for forgiveness, but he's not appeased. She's not appeased. So keep going. Eventually you say, look, he's never going to be, what can you do? I mean, if the person just says, no, there's nothing you can do. And God says, okay, I get that. But that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. Sometimes there are tragedies.
When you ask for forgiveness, even if you're not forgiven, that's freeing for the person asking for forgiveness. And it's also freeing to receive the Torah. So that's the connection.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the rift still remains, because, look, some things are unforgivable. No, and if you can't fulfill a mitzvah, the law is that you don't have to. So if someone does something to you that's unforgivable in your mind just, I cannot forgive that. Okay, then if you can't do it, you're freed from it, right? If it's Yom Kippur and if you don't eat, you'll die, and the doctor says you have to eat, okay, so you eat. If you can't do the mitzvah, you don't have to. You can only do the mitzvahs that you can do. But the tragedy is that Yom Kippur is going to come and go, and there's still going to be rifts between the Jewish people. But we do our best. We do our best to try to recreate what happened at Mount Sinai. Now, at Mount Sinai, you remember the story. The main sin there was the sin of the golden calf. And so after 40 days, there's a 40-day period, and Moses goes up for another 40 days, and then he comes down with the Torah. Well, it comes down with the second set of tablets. So look what Rashi says here. If you come back to the okay. So why does we explained in the Mishnah why it was such a happy day? Hang on a second. Why it's such a happy day that that couples meet each other a few days after Tisha B'Av. Because it reminds us that the temple is going to be rebuilt. Because of what King Solomon said in Proverbs, it reminds us that the temple is going to be rebuilt and there's a future for the Jewish people. Okay. So but then the good question you asked before, what's so wonderful about Yom Kippur? So the answer that's so wonderful about Yom Kippur is it's the day where we come back as Jews to be we're happy again because everyone's united. And that's so wonderful. And that's Yom Kippur. But what we haven't said is, what does Yom Kippur have to do with Mount Sinai? Right? So how can I stand here and tell you that Shavuot and Yom Kippur are the same thing, and that Mount Sinai, the Torah is telling us, we have Mount Sinai in Exodus, and we have Mount Sinai in Leviticus, and it's the same thing, and a really good question would be, yeah, on Shavuot we got the Torah, that's Mount Sinai, but Yom Kippur has nothing to do with Mount Sinai. Now, one last point before I reveal the answer. What happened when we got the Torah? We blew the shofar. Why do we blow the shofar on Yom Kippur, on the Yovel year? We know why we blow the shofar at the end of the High Holy Days, and you can eat again, okay, fine. But why do we blow the shofar on Yovel? What does that have to do? So, that Moses comes down, he sees the sin of the golden calf, waits 40 days, goes back up the mountain, there for another 40 days, comes back down the mountain with the second set of tablets. Remember the second set of tablets? So look at Rashi now, in the middle of the page, where it says Matan Torah. This is the giving of the Torah. The day that Moses came down with the second set of tablets was Yom Kippur. That was Yom Kippur. So what does Shavuot and Yom Kippur have to do with... why is Shavuot and Yom Kippur the same thing? Because on both of those days we got the Torah. We got the first set of tablets on Shavuot. We got the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur. That's why they're the same thing.
And the result was good.
So what's the idea? Both times the Jewish people agreed before Moses came down to accept Torah. To accept the Torah. That's why Shavuot and Yom Kippur are the same thing. Because they're both the days that we accept the Torah. And because of that, we blow the shofar. Now, what does that have to do with Jubilee? Because Jubilee is the day where everyone who's a slave, everyone who's poor, everyone who lost their land, anyone who's having any trouble at all, is restored as whole. Right? So let's say you're someone who bought up all of the land in town. On the 50th year of the Jubilee, all land reverts back to its original owner. Which means that on Jubilee year, it's, look, for capitalists, this is not the greatest thing, but let's say you have a guy who's really, really poor and someone else who has nothing on the Jubilee year, it all resets and everyone's worth the exact same amount. Because everyone goes back to their original land holdings, and if you had all kinds of land holdings and all kinds of animals and all kinds of stuff, you have to give it back to wherever you got it, and everyone goes back to even. And everything is perfect. Everyone is appeased like one person with one heart. That's the Jubilee year. And so for that reason, at that moment, we blow the shofar. So what we see now is there's 3 times we blow the shofar. We blow the shofar at Mount Sinai when we got the Torah. We blow the shofar on Yom Kippur. And we blow the shofar on the Jubilee year. Did everyone see that? Let me say it one more time. In Exodus, we read that when we got the Torah, when God for the first time started saying the 10 Commandments, and the people said, it's too loud, we can't hear it, tell it to Moses, there was loud sounds of the shofar. That's Shavuot. That was 50 days after they left Egypt. We heard the shofar on Shavuot. Comes Yom Kippur. All Jews are back together as one. We've healed all the rifts. By the way, what did we say about Rosh Hashanah? I'm sorry, what did we say about Shavuot? When we heard the shofar and everyone is here, it's so loud, and Shavuot, we're all one heart, one people. Comes Yom Kippur. We heal all our rifts, we fix everything, and we hear the shofar. Comes the Jubilee year. We heal all rifts, everything gets reset, nobody's poor anymore, nobody has any rifts, everything's set, we all have the same amount. Of course, in 5 years, your neighbor's going to own your house, and you're saying you'll be working for him because you don't know how to manage your money, but whatever, for the moment, everything's fine. We hear the shofar. So all 3 things are the same thing. Shavuot, Yom Kippur, and the Jubilee are all about the same thing. Okay, so if you look at the last source, there's a midrash about this. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, 46. You see how it's not bold? Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, 46? It was supposed to be. So don't get caught up on that. There's no, I forgot. Okay, who's got the, Shelley, would you mind? The son of Betera said.
The son of Betera said, Moses spent 40 days on the mount, expounding the meaning of the words of the Torah and examining its letters. After 40 days, he took the Torah and descended on the 10th of the month, on the Day of Atonement, and gave it as an everlasting inheritance to the children of Israel.
Right, so you see there that it was on Yom Kippur that Moses came down with the second set of tablets. Okay.
As it is said, and this shall be unto you an everlasting statute. Rabbi Zechariah said, they read in the Torah and found written therein, and ye shall afflict your souls. And on the Day of Atonement they caused a shofar to be sounded throughout all the camp, and proclaimed a fast for all Israel, old and young. Were it not for the Day of Atonement, the world could not stand, because the Day of Atonement is in this world and in the world to come. As it is said, it is a Sabbath of Sabbaths unto you. A Sabbath refers to this world. Sabbaths refers to the world to come. Moreover, if all the festivals pass away, the Day of Atonement will not pass away, for the Day of Atonement affects reconciliation for serious offenses as well as for slight offenses. Whence do we know that the Day of Atonement affects reconciliation? Because it is said, for on this day shall atonement be made for you, to cleanse you. From all your sins shall ye be clean. From your sins is not written here, but from all your sins shall ye be clean before the Lord.
Okay, so there's only one question left to ask, and that is this. Why does the Torah work so hard to compare Yom Kippur to Shavuot? Why does the Torah work so hard to compare Yom Kippur to Shavuot? And the answer is the same thing with Yovel and the same thing with Shavuot. Shavuot is the holiday of accepting the Torah. Yom Kippur we don't think of as the holiday of accepting the Torah. But the only way to get the world to reset and to go back to the way it was supposed to be, which is, by the way, what is the definition of a reset and the way it's supposed to be? How would you say that? Where we all get along, where everything's equal, where we're all in good shape, where we don't have any fights or rifts between us. And the only way, so the way that that happens on Shavuot is because we accept the Torah. And so on Yom Kippur, we're not forgiven because we ask for forgiveness. That's a misnomer. This is what I never understood until this week. On Yom Kippur, we're not forgiven for... on Yom Kippur, we're not forgiven because we ask for forgiveness. We're forgiven because we've recommitted to accepting the Torah. That's why it's the same as Shavuot. Shavuot's the day that we accept the Torah. On Yom Kippur, we say, you know what? Since Shavuot, we've strayed and we haven't been following the Torah, and because of that, there are all these rifts that exist between us. But if I ask for appeasement, the reason that I'm asking for appeasement is because I remember what it means to accept Torah. That's why Moses had to come down with the second set of tablets so that we could... What was the point of coming down with the second set of tablets? You know what he was doing those 40 days that he went back up the mountain? Asking for forgiveness for the golden calf. It was only on the 40th day when he came down that we were all forgiven for the golden calf. And the fact that he came down on that day, whatever day he was going to come down on, was going to be called for the rest of time the Day of Atonement, which is what we call Yom Kippur today. That's why that day is Yom Kippur. Had he come down a few days later, then the Yom Kippur would have been a few days later. But when he came down the mountain, whatever day it was going to be that he came down would be the day that God said, okay, now I forgive you. But why? Why did God forgive them? Because he felt that they were ready again for Moses to come down with the tablets and for the Jewish people to accept the Torah. So on Yom Kippur, what you need to do is dress in white to be like the angels, to say, I'm here to accept the Torah, and the way that I'm going to show that I'm going to do that is get back to Mount Sinai, that moment where we were all appeased. And if you miss the point that on Yom Kippur we all need to be appeased, and that you need to get back to what Shavuot was, then you didn't do Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur and Shavuot are the same thing. They're that moment where all the Jews are united as one. The Torah works very hard to make that connection, but if you don't see that, you miss the whole thing. But one thing I will tell you, nowhere in the Torah does it say that on Shavuot is the anniversary of getting the Torah. All it will tell you is that it's a pilgrimage holiday. So if you want to know why what Shavuot has anything to do with actually getting the Torah, you can't look in the Torah. You have to go back and rewatch this class. That's the only way to understand it. All right, Shabbat Shalom.
Are you here for Bar Mitzvah tonight? No?
It's a question that's